My fiancé told me to stop calling him my future husband because it made him look like he'd settled. That was the moment I realized I was about to blow up my entire life. My name is Talia Grayson. I'm 33 now, but 4 months ago I was 32, engaged, and absolutely sure I knew what the next year of my life would look like. I could picture it. I'd be in some overpriced lace dress under strings of fairy lights we couldn't really afford, saying vows I'd rewritten 10 times to sound effortless and deep. My parents would be dabbing their eyes. His parents would be pretending not to. Our friends would be half drunk on champagne and sentiment. Instead, I'm sitting in an apartment that feels too big for one person, replaying one single sentence in my head until it barely sounds like English anymore. Stop introducing me as your future wife. It makes me look like I settled. He didn't say it in a joking way. He didn't mumble it or laugh or leave me any room to tell myself I'd misheard. He said it on the highway. Both of us trapped in the car, in the flat, impatient tone of someone finally saying out loud what they've been thinking for a long time. If you'd asked me a year ago to describe us, I would have said we were solid. Not soulmates. Not a movie. Just good. We met when I was 30 and he was 31 at a financial compliance seminar, which is exactly as sexy as it sounds. I work in risk management at a mid-sized firm. Daniel is a corporate lawyer. The coffee was burnt. The room was cold. The slides were terrible. He was sitting 2 chairs over, tie loosened, shoulders tense. When the presenter droned something about minimizing legal exposure, Daniel leaned toward me and muttered, "The only exposure I'm worried about is from these pastries. They taste like they violate several human rights conventions." It wasn't that funny. I laughed like it was. After the seminar, we lingered in the conference room, the last 2 people besides the staff stacking chairs. He asked if I wanted to grab a drink and debrief the trauma of mandatory training. I said yes. On paper, we made sense. 2 professionals. Similar income brackets. Similar backgrounds. Similar vague plans about marriage and kids eventually, when the timing's right. We moved in together a year later. He proposed last spring, on a little weekend trip. I cried. He looked proud of himself and relieved. We put a deposit down on a venue for next October. For a while, everything followed the script. Then, a few months ago, tiny cracks started appearing. And, like most people, I tried very hard not to look at them. It started with comments that were easy to brush off. "You've been in that role a while, haven't you?" he'd say casually, scrolling through his phone. "Have you thought about a promotion? Or maybe jumping to a bigger firm? You're so capable. It feels like you're playing small." Or, "My friend Mark just made partner at 35. His wife's already VP at her firm. Total power couple. They're probably going to end up on some 40 under 40 list." He'd grin when he said it, like it was just an interesting fact about the world, like the weather. Not a comparison. Not a judgment. Except, what is a power couple, if not what you're supposed to want to be? I make good money. Not brag about your bonus on Instagram money, but comfortable money. I like my team. I like my hours. I like closing my laptop at 5 and not touching my email again until morning. To me, that's success. To Daniel, I started to suspect, it looked like wasted potential. 3 weeks before everything blew up, we went to his friend Vanessa's engagement party. Rooftop bar, skyline view, flower wall for photos, the whole Instagram dream. We walked in and I felt his hand squeeze mine just a little too tight, the way he does when he's flipping from boyfriend mode into networking mode. He knew half the room. Lawyers, consultants, people in fitted suits talking about stock options and ski trips. I did what I always do in those situations. Smiled, made small talk, listened more than I spoke. Whenever we joined a new cluster, I'd say, "Hi, I'm Talia. This is my fiancé, Daniel." Simple. True. On the surface, the night went fine. No arguments. No drama. Just too many canapes and slightly too much wine. But in the car on the way home, the air felt tense. We'd barely merged onto the highway when he said, "Can you not do that?" I watched the blur of streetlights in my window. "Do what?" "Introduce me like that." "Like what?" I asked. "As your fiancé?" He shifted his grip on the steering wheel. "It just sounds weird. Like you're making some big announcement." "I don't know. It makes me uncomfortable." We are engaged, I said slowly. Is it weird to say what's true? He sighed. I'm just saying you don't have to lead with it every time, that's all. I let it go. I told myself he was tired, that he had 2 whiskeys on an empty stomach. That men just get weird about public displays of anything. I wish that had been the only time. 2 nights before the sentence that ended us, we went out to dinner with some of his colleagues and law school friends. Long table. Dim lighting. The kind of place where the check has no numbers under 3 digits. Someone asked how we met. The story rolled off my tongue like muscle memory. Then one of them asked how long we'd been together. 3 years, I said. And this is my future husband. We're getting married in October. There was a momentary chorus of congratulations, a few smiles, the usual. Across the table, Daniel's face went tight for just a second, like he'd pulled a muscle. He recovered fast, told a funny story about a case, refilled my water glass, laughed in all the right places. He didn't say anything about it until we were back in the car. He shut his door harder than necessary, started the engine, and sat there gripping the wheel like he was trying not to shout. I asked you not to do that, he said. My stomach dropped. Do what? I said, even though we both knew. Introduce me like that. As your future husband. I stared at him. That's literally what you are. He shook his head, eyes still on the road. It makes me look like I settled. The words hit like a punch. Cold. Precise. It took me a second to find my voice. Like you what? Like I couldn't do better, he snapped. Like I just picked someone convenient. When you say it like that in front of my colleagues, it draws attention to the fact that you're not. He cut himself off. Not what? I asked. My voice sounded very far away, even to me. Not on the same level as my friends' partners, he said finally. They're marrying surgeons, executives, entrepreneurs. You're comfortable. You've been in the same role for years. You're great at what you do, but you're not ambitious like them. There it was. The fine print I hadn't wanted to see, now in bold. So when I introduce you as the man I'm going to marry, I said quietly, what you hear is that you've settled. You're twisting my words, he shot back. I'm repeating them. You're taking them out of context. No, I said. You're just finally saying the quiet part out loud. He exhaled sharply through his nose. My colleagues talk, he muttered. They compare. When you lead with future husband, it calls attention to certain things. Certain things like the fact that I'm not shiny enough? I asked. Not impressive enough on paper to be on your arm without hurting your stock price? Talia, he warned. Something in me went perfectly still. I'd been adjusting around this man for 3 years, like he was a piece of sharp furniture in a too-small room, laughing off jabs, shrinking in small ways, tucking away parts of myself that didn't fit neatly into his picture. Now I could finally see the picture. You think being engaged to me makes you look like you settled, I said. You think I make you look bad. He didn't say yes. He didn't have to. He stared straight ahead, swallowed hard, and kept driving. We rode home in silence. He claimed he was exhausted and went straight to bed. I sat on the couch in the dark and stared at nothing. I didn't cry. That surprised me. Instead, it felt like something clicked into place inside my chest. Not rage. Not yet. Just absolute, icy clarity. If I married this man, I would spend the rest of my life auditioning for a role, impressive enough, knowing the director had already decided I was wrong for the part. After a couple of hours of just sitting there listening to the refrigerator hum, I got up and grabbed my laptop. Daniel kept all our social plans in a shared calendar. Brunches, engagement parties, work events, a whole schedule of places he wanted to show us off as a unit when it suited him. At each of those events, my name sat there as his +1, his accessory. I opened my email and started typing. One by one, I wrote to the hosts of everything coming up in the next month that involved Daniel plus Talia. Hi, unfortunately I won't be able to make it. So sorry for the short notice. I hope it's a wonderful event. I didn't mention why. I didn't mention him. I just quietly took myself out of scenes where I was only supposed to stand there and look like a good investment. Then I opened a new email and scrolled to a name I'd rarely initiated contact with. Melissa Hart. Daniel's best friend from college. The only one of his friends who had ever pulled me aside and asked real questions like, "How are you doing?" and actually listened. "Hey, it's Talia. Do you have a minute to talk about Sunday's brunch?" She replied almost instantly. "Sure. Is everything okay?" Not even close, I thought. On the phone, just before midnight, I told her exactly what he'd said in the car. Word for word. I braced myself for "he didn't mean it like that," or "you're overreacting." Instead, she said, "He actually used the word settled?" "Yes," I said. Those were his exact words. There was a long, furious silence. "What do you want me to do?" she asked finally. By the time we hung up, we had a plan. Sunday's brunch was at Daniel's favorite spot, bottomless mimosas, reclaimed wood, the whole thing. Melissa would get there early, ask the host to put an envelope at Daniel's place at the table before anyone else arrived. Inside he'd find a letter from me and a printed email from our venue. Cancellation confirmed. By the time I finally crawled into bed, he was asleep, breathing evenly, completely unaware that the future he thought was guaranteed had just shifted. He assumed tomorrow would be like every other Sunday. He'd walk into that restaurant as a man on the rise with a cute fiancé. He'd walk out as something else. Sunday morning, the apartment felt like a stage right before the curtain goes up. Too quiet. Too still. Daniel moved around our bedroom with this jumpy, brittle energy. Ironing the same shirt twice. Changing his watch. Checking his reflection again and again. Maybe he could feel it. Maybe guilt hums at a frequency you can't quite hear. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee I didn't really want. "Are you seriously not coming?" he asked finally. "I'm not," I said. He exhaled sharply. "Can we please not make this a spectacle?" he muttered. "My friends are going to think something's wrong." "Something is wrong," I said. He froze. But he didn't ask what. He just grabbed his keys. "I'll see you later," he said. "Maybe," I replied. He paused. "What does that mean?" I just looked at him. Calm. Unreadable. After a second, he shook his head and left. When the door closed, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt full. Like standing at the edge of something big. My phone buzzed about 20 minutes later. "Melissa, he's here." They seated everyone. Envelope is at his spot. My heart was steady. "Okay. Thank you." A minute passed. Then my phone lit up with his name. I let it ring. It rang again. And again. Then the text started. "What is this?" "Talia, answer your phone. Tell me this is some kind of joke. Did you seriously cancel the venue? Call me now." I flipped the phone screen down on the table. Another 20 minutes later, the front door slammed open. Daniel stormed in, breath ragged, hair disheveled. He had the envelope crushed in one fist, papers bent and creased. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, waving the printouts. I stayed seated. "It's exactly what it looks like. You canceled the venue," he shouted. "Without even talking to me? In front of everyone." "I couldn't think of a better way to solve your problem," I said. "What problem?" "You said having me introduce you as my future husband makes you look like you settled," I replied. "Now you're not engaged to me." Problem solved. His mouth opened and closed. "Are you out of your mind?" he snapped. "You ambushed me. Do you know how humiliating that was?" I walked in and they were all looking at me like they felt sorry for me. Melissa just kept staring. "Do you have any idea what that felt like?" "Humiliating." I repeated. "That's what you're focused on?" "You blindsided me, Talia," he said. "You don't handle issues this way. Adults talk, they don't." I tried to talk, I cut in. "You told me being engaged to me makes you look like you settled. You told me you're embarrassed to have me introduced as the person you're going to marry. What would you like me to do with that information? Smile? Pretend it's normal? Keep auditioning." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small living room like a caged animal. "It was one comment," he insisted. "One careless comment. You're blowing up our entire life over something I said badly when I was stressed." "No," I said. "It wasn't one comment." I stood up slowly. "Don't rewrite this. You've been making little digs for months. About my job. My ambition. How I compare to your friends' wives. This was just the first time you said the quiet part plainly. That's not fair, he muttered. What's not fair, I said quietly, is being with someone who sees you as a downgrade and thinks you should be grateful for it. He flinched. It's not like that, he said. I was just, I don't know, venting. I grew up with parents who... This isn't about your parents, I said. This is about the fact that you told me, twice, that being with me makes you look like you settled. I believe you. And I'm not going to marry someone who feels that way. His shoulders slumped slightly, anger leaking out and leaving panic behind. Talia, we're engaged, he said, almost pleading now. You can't just end everything over one fight. We can do counseling. We can. It's not a misunderstanding, I said calmly. It's clarity. You finally said what you really think. I heard you. I walked to the drawer by the counter, took out the small velvet box, and set it on the table between us. He stared at it like it might explode. I'm done, I said. I'm not going to marry you. He scrubbed a hand over his face, eyes suddenly shiny. Please don't do this, he whispered. Not like this. You did this, I said softly. The moment you decided, I made you look like you'd settled. The room was very, very quiet. Finally, he sank into a chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I didn't mean it, he said, voice cracking. You meant it enough to say it twice, I replied. Once on the way home from an engagement party. Once after dinner with your colleagues. That's not a slip. That's a belief. He didn't argue. After a long moment, I said, I need you to pack a bag and stay somewhere else for a few days. We'll sort out the practical stuff later, when this doesn't feel like an open wound. He looked up. Are you really ending this? He asked. I already have, I said. He closed his eyes briefly. I'll go to my sister's, he mumbled. Okay. I listened to the sounds of drawers and zippers from the bedroom. When he came back out with a suitcase in his hand, he paused at the door. Talia, he said one last time, voice shaking. Please. I didn't answer. If I opened my mouth at all, I knew he'd find some way to climb back into my doubt. I stayed still. After a moment, he left. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed didn't feel like loss. It felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in months. The suitcase wheels had barely faded down the hall before my phone lit up again. Daniel, please, can we just talk? I didn't mean it like that. Daniel, I'm freaking out. Pick up. I watched the messages stack up until they blurred. Then I turned the phone off and went to bed alone for the first time in 3 years. Morning came with that strange hollow feeling, like waking up after a nightmare and then realizing that, no, it wasn't a dream. I rolled over and saw the empty side of the bed, the dent in his pillow, and everything rushed back. I got up, made coffee, opened my laptop. Ending a relationship is a sentence. Untangling a life is paperwork. By 10 a.m., I was on the phone with a lawyer a coworker had recommended. We weren't married, but we had a lease together, some shared accounts, deposits on a venue, and a caterer. It's overwhelming, she said gently after I stumbled through the explanation. But you're doing this at the right time. Before there are legal marriage documents and shared property and children, it's much cleaner. That sentence sat with me. Before I locked myself into a life where the person standing at the other end of the aisle thought I was what he'd settled for. We went down a list. What was in my name? What was in his? What we'd paid for? What we'd lose? When I hung up, I expected to feel worse. Instead, underneath the grief and the adrenaline, there was this thin layer of relief. Like I'd stepped off a train I hadn't realized was going somewhere I didn't actually want to go. Around lunchtime, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello. Talia, dear. It's Helen. Daniel's mother. My stomach tightened. Hi, Helen. She exhaled slowly. Daniel called us last night, she said. He said you ended the engagement. That you canceled the venue. I needed to hear from you what happened. Of course he called his parents. Did he tell you why? I asked. He said you got very upset about something he said, that it was a misunderstanding that you made into a big scene, she said carefully. He was very emotional. But he didn't give details. Talia, what did he say? I stared at a corner of the cancellation printout sticking out from under my notebook. He told me to stop calling him my future husband, I said quietly. Because it makes him look like he's settled. Silence. He said it in the car after I introduced him that way to his colleagues, I added. And it wasn't the first time he'd complained about me calling him my fiancé in front of people. He's been making comments about my job and my lack of ambition for months. Another silence, heavier. Oh, she breathed. Oh, Talia. He actually used the word settled, she asked, voice tight. Yes. She made a small, angry sound, not at me. That's not okay, she said. That's not how you talk about someone you're supposed to marry. My throat burned unexpectedly. He made me feel like I was something he'd settled for, I said. I'm not going to walk down an aisle toward someone who thinks that way about me. I don't blame you, she said softly. I'm so sorry. I don't know what's gotten into him. It's like he's lost perspective. We sat there in the quiet for a moment. Do you think there's any chance you two could work through this? She asked gently. Counseling, maybe? No, I said. It came out steady. This isn't one bad day. It's a pattern, he finally said out loud. He showed me who he is when it comes to me. I believe him. She let out a long breath. I understand, she said. I may not like it, but I understand. For what it's worth, we love you. We always have. You've been good for him. Better than he deserved, clearly. A tear slid down my face before I could stop it. Thank you, I whispered. We talked a bit longer. She said she was going to talk to him, not to fix us, but to make sure he understood what exactly he'd done. When we hung up, the apartment felt quieter, but not lonely. More like a blank page. The next few weeks settled into a strange rhythm. During the day, I handled logistics. Lawyers. Landlords. Deposits. At night, my phone would light up with whatever stage of grief Daniel was in. First, anger. You had no right to cancel without talking to me. Do you have any idea how much money we lost? You made me look pathetic in front of my friends. Then, defensiveness. I told you I didn't mean it that way. You're twisting my words. No one else would throw away 3 years over one badly phrased comment. Then, slowly, desperation. Talia, I'm sorry. I started seeing a therapist. I know I've been obsessed with image and status. Please, let me prove I don't actually think you're beneath me. That one made me put the phone down and leave it on the counter for 2 hours. When I did respond, it was brief. I heard you the first time. I believe you meant what you said. We're done. Please respect that. He never entirely did. Meanwhile, the brunch incident rippled through his friend group like gossip always does. Melissa kept me updated with short, sharp texts. I told him exactly what he said to you. I told him you didn't humiliate him. He did that himself when he decided his fiancé wasn't good enough for his image. She said some of his friends thought I'd gone nuclear, that delivering a cancellation at brunch was over the top. Others admitted, a little guiltily, that they'd heard him make comments before. Jokes about how I wasn't as driven as the other wives to be. How I seemed a little too content. Funny how hindsight works. About 3 weeks after he moved out, Daniel came by to talk logistics in person. We sat at our dining table like coworkers dividing up a project. He looked tired. Thinner. There were dark circles under his eyes he hadn't had before. I found a new place, he said. I move in next month. Okay, I said. We went over the lease. Utilities. The non-refundable wedding stuff. I'll cover the deposits we can't get back, he said abruptly, signing one of the forms. You shouldn't have to pay for that. It was my decision to cancel, I said. I'm prepared to split the loss. He shook his head. No, he said quietly. His jaw clenched. You were right about something. I cared more about how everything looked than how you felt. The least I can do is take the financial hit. For a heartbeat, I saw the version of him I'd fallen in love with. The one who'd stayed up with me when my dad was in the hospital, who'd made grilled cheese at 2 a.m. when I came home from a terrible week. If that man had spoken up months ago instead of the one obsessing over optics, maybe we'd be planning a wedding instead of an exit strategy. But he hadn't. And I couldn't unknow that. A few days later, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. My name was on the front in his handwriting. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter, several pages, blue ink, messy lines. Daniel typed everything. Seeing his actual handwriting felt intimate in a way I wasn't prepared for. He wrote about growing up in a house where image was everything. Parents who judged neighbors by the cars in their driveways. A father whose love language was job titles and square footage. A mother who treated appearances like some kind of armor. He wrote about how he'd learned that his worth depended on being impressive, on being the kind of person other people envied. And he'd quietly decided that that included his partner. "You were never actually not enough," one line read. "I made you feel that way because I was terrified that if my life didn't look perfect from the outside, people would see how small and insecure I really feel on the inside." He admitted he'd compared me to his friends' wives not because I fell short in any real way, but because he'd turned them into some checklist of success. "I projected my fear onto you," he wrote. "I made you carry it. I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't make you unhear what I said in that car." At the end, he said, "If there is any part of you that thinks we could rebuild this into something healthier, I'll do whatever it takes. If there isn't, I'll accept that. You deserve someone who saw your worth from the beginning, not someone who had to lose you to understand it." I read it twice. It was the most honest thing he'd ever given me. Then I folded it neatly, slid it back into the envelope, and put it in the back of a drawer. Not because it didn't matter, but because it didn't change the most important fact. He hadn't turned into a different person. He had just finally noticed who he'd been all along. And I had finally decided I deserved better. 1 month after he moved into his new apartment, the last of our joint accounts were closed. The final piece of mail with both our names on it was forwarded. The last little dribble of a wedding deposit hit my account. Just like that, there was no us left on paper. For the first time in weeks, I woke up without that sinking feeling in my stomach. I made coffee, opened the windows, watered the plants. The air felt lighter. I wasn't happy exactly, but I wasn't in pain, which, for that moment, was enough. Over the next month, my life slowly stopped being the wreckage of my engagement and started just being my life. I reached out to friends I'd let drift. People who liked me because I made them laugh or listened to their problems or remembered their favorite things, not because of where I worked or what my title was. I said yes to dinners and slow Sunday mornings. I signed up for a pottery class with a friend from work. Started going on hikes again. Picked up books that had nothing to do with fixing your relationship and everything to do with filling my own head. A coworker dragged me to a rock climbing gym because it's weirdly good if you're anxious, and I discovered that there is something very grounding about focusing 100% of your brain power on not falling off a wall. Piece by piece, I grew back into the version of myself that existed before Daniel's constant comparisons. Before I started measuring my worth against an imaginary scoreboard only he could see. Before I let someone else decide whether or not I counted as enough. About 3 weeks into this new normal, I ran into him. Of course it happened at the coffee shop I'd been avoiding, the one near the old apartment. I pushed the door open, phone in hand, already half scrolling, and almost walked directly into his table. He was sitting by the window, sleeves rolled up, half-drunk latte in front of him. He wasn't alone. A woman sat across from him. Pretty. Polished. Laughing at something he'd just said. He looked up and saw me. His whole body went still. "Talia," he said, like the wind had been knocked out of him. "Hi, Daniel," I replied. The woman turned to look at me, then at him. He stammered something like, "Oh, this is a friend," but I didn't linger to hear it. I nodded politely to both of them, ordered my drink, and left. No drama. No scene. I didn't owe him a performance. I owed myself peace. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. "It was good to see you. You looked happy." For the first time since everything ended, one of his messages didn't sting. It just felt unnecessary. I deleted it without replying. A few days later, I met Melissa for lunch. What had started as shared trauma bonding had turned into actual friendship. She flopped into the booth with a sigh and set her drink down. "Okay," she said. Do you want the short version or the long version? Depends, I said. Is this about Daniel? Her expression softened. Yeah. I stirred my soup. Go ahead. He's not doing great, she said. Some of the group took your side hard. A couple just quietly ghosted him. And his mom. Melissa let out a low whistle. She lit him up, she said. Told him he'd thrown away someone good because he cared more about being impressive than being decent. I didn't quite know what to do with that information. Sadness, maybe. Or just that weird ache you get when you realize someone else is learning a hard lesson you already paid for. He asked about you, she added. About me? I frowned. He wanted to know if you were seeing anyone, she said. I told him, that's not your business. You had someone good and you made her feel like she wasn't enough. Let her go. A warm, grateful feeling settled in my chest. Thank you, I said. Don't thank me, she replied. You're the one who finally chose yourself. It wasn't until I was walking home that I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at him. Not at myself. Not at the girl who'd stayed too long, trying to twist herself into something more sparkly to make him proud to be seen with her. The anger had burned out and left something steadier behind. Not forgiveness exactly, but closure. The kind you build yourself. Without their permission. Without their apology. Just by sitting with the truth long enough that it stops hurting to look at. Standing at the crosswalk, sun in my eyes, it hit me. That settled comment hadn't ruined a perfect relationship. It had revealed the one we actually had. I hadn't walked away to punish him. I'd walked away because, for the first time in years, I finally decided to take my own side. That night, I lit a candle, did the dishes, and curled up on the couch with a book. For the first time in a long time, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt like home. I wasn't anyone's downgrade. I wasn't the person you ended up with when your dream girl didn't show up. I wasn't a line item on someone's ambition spreadsheet. I was just me. Enough. And finally, I believed it.